And I have to say that I'm incredibly honored to have met Amy Meyer. Also, my other passion outside of studying music and creativity is the natural world. And a few years ago, I took up studying lichens, of all things. And I'm now on the California Lichen Society board. So, crazier things can happen. If anybody that knows what a lichen is, you see them everywhere. But anyway, that's an aside. And many, many decades of being in nature has really infused well-being into my world. So thank you so much. Okay, so I'm the last speaker between you guys and lunch. So I'm happy to talk about this topic. I'm going to talk about creativity and aging. Next slide. So we've gotten different ways of hearing of statistics, and I think I like to show the visual picture of what's happening to our population in the United States. And you can see in 2000, there were 35 million individuals who are 60 and older. By 2020, we expect that to be 53 million, and by 2050, there'll be 80 million. This means you guys have a voice. You really have a voice in our society, more so than ever. It will be the first time in 2030 that there's more people over age 60 than under 18 in the history of time. So I think this is a huge opportunity for the Amy Meyers of the world who have a passion, who have something greater than themselves that they want to become an advocate for. And I think this is a great opportunity to become more involved in advocacy. But back up one, a little quick. I also think that having an additional 30 years of an average lifespan now gives us additional opportunities for not only for advocacy, but also for creativity. And you know, this is again, the first time in the history of our nation that we have so many advanced years available to us to contribute and to grow and to think about what are the opportunities. So today I want to talk a little bit about the opportunities for creativity. Okay, thank you. So, you know, I think we heard with the talks earlier about what happens to our body physically, what happens to the brain, and we do know that our brain, like our muscles and like other organs in our body, do shrink and change with age. And I think this is just an illustration of the blue that you see are the areas, and it's kind of all over different parts of the brain, but in particular it seems to affect more of the frontal cortex. And this was the area that Joaquin was talking about, how his video games help with multitasking, and it helps with improving the function of the front part of the brain. So if we go to the next slide. But what's also interesting is it seems that older adults use their brain in different ways than younger people. So on the left over here, you can see doing a task when a younger person might get activation on bilateral, just in these smaller parts up here in the kind of frontal temporal cortex here. But older adults use those same areas, but they probably also recruit additional areas. So we don't just think about the loss of tissue or changes in the brain, but we also think about different strategies for using our brain. And that's a good thing, because this is also an opportunity to be engaged in things that can affect your brain health. Okay, next slide. So you heard earlier that an active and creative lifestyle is good for the brain and body, and also your well-being and your spiritual being. We know that. There's lots of research, and I think the first speaker talked a lot about all of the different research that's been done in physical activity, and this has been, you know, we have great animal models of how physical activity works for older adults, but we don't have great animal models and research yet for creativity, but I think it's increasing. Next slide. And as was mentioned earlier, physical activity, there's lots of studies about this and how important it is for healthy aging. Next. But what about creativity? How many of you have ever thought that this might be important for your well-being? You've thought about it. Okay, I'm talking to the right senior center. And it's not an accident that creativity is one of the essential components in aging well, and living well and aging well. And again, the founders of the San Francisco Senior Center 70 years ago, Sue had shared some newspaper clippings, and it turned out that the arts and creativity were part of the original founding of the center, if I'm not mistaken. So So this has been a pillar of the Senior Center for a long time. Okay, so let's think about creativity across the lifespan. So I would say who participated in some sort of creative activity, music, dance, theater, whatever, as a child? How many participated? And usually it's the majority of the room. How about in midlife? How many of you had a regular participation? Okay, that's more than the average group that I talk to. Usually what happens in midlife in the United States is we tend to the work life, and we tend to family life. And what happens traditionally in the United States is we kind of ignore the creativity, and oftentimes we even ignore that physical activity. How about in late life? How many of you continue to do it in late life? Well, I think we got choir members in the audience. Usually what I see is that people will then pick back up this activity. And what was interesting when I was doing my work in Finland as a Fulbright scholar, one of the differences is that the engagement in the arts is a lifelong activity. They actually don't traditionally stop in the middle part of life. It is a part of their life throughout the whole lifespan, all the way up to the end. So, if we go back, one more slide. So I think it's important to think about when you've been engaged in these type of activities, but if you go to the next slide, it actually doesn't matter when you start your engagement in creativity in the arts. And this was also a theme with the physical activity. So if you take any message away from today, here's the punchline here. It's good if you started early. We know that people who have arts training when they're younger, it's better for their brain and their health. It's never too late to start. You can still get the benefits. And lifelong creative engagement is also possible. And this is something that I'm hoping with the advocacy with the National Network for the Arts, another organization that is attempting to be defunded, but I think one of the ideas is we're trying to think about ways to make engagement in the arts much more of a lifelong activity and not this start and stop and start and stop activity. But we have some ideas on how we might do that. Okay, next slide. So I'm just going to give you a couple overview of a couple studies here. We know that older dancers perform better on tests of cognition and also motor function. And the reason why we think that is you can imagine dancing is complex, kind of proprioceptive. It involves remembering moves, and it involves synchronizing with people. So it actually, you definitely have to use your brain to do that. And there's something special about integrating the movement, the physical aspect, with the thinking ability that we think is important. And there's numerous studies now, by numerous I mean like 5 or 10, nothing like physical activity, which has hundreds of articles. But I think the research is stacking up to suggest that dancing is important to do as a creative activity. And the next slide. We also know that older adults who play a musical instrument longer have better cognitive ability, and these are the thinking abilities that Joaquin was talking about. So if you look on the graph here, the white bars are what we call are the non-musicians. The one with the slashed lines there, these are what they call low-activity musicians. So they're not performing and not practicing very much. Versus the older adults who are the high-activity musicians are in the black line. And I think what you can see are these are different cognitive tests, and it doesn't really matter which ones they are, but the pattern's the same, so that the non-musicians score the lowest, the middle activity or the low activity score the middle, and the high-activity musicians score on the highest. So this is really curious. We don't know why this is. I think we're just starting to learn why this is, what this would even be possible. Okay, next slide. We also know that playing a musical instrument is associated with a decreased risk of getting dementia. And this work was done by Verghese and colleagues. And we've never done any prospective studies where we take a cohort of individuals and follow them over time and see if they actually have a decreased risk. But this is an association study, and it definitely needs further follow-up to do primary prevention. And also, older adults who took music lessons as a child, even if they haven't played for decades, how many of those are in the audience of you? Good. You still can have a better brain response to speech sounds than those who never had music lessons ever. So what this suggests, and this is work by Nina Kraus out of Northwestern University, what this suggests is that there's something very special about that time period as a child and taking musical training and music lessons. And that the plastic changes that occur in the brain can persist for decades to come. And it will help, in particular, you probably are familiar with the cocktail effect when you're trying to listen to somebody speaking and you're having difficulty hearing at a party. So the people who took, older adults who took music lessons when they were younger are better at detecting that speech and noise when they're older adults, even if they stop their music lessons after high school or junior high. So this also gives us a suggestion that the music training in particular is very important to affect brain health. Okay. And have you guys heard of this book by Francine Toder? She's a psychologist in the Sacramento area who wrote a wonderful book about beginning creative engagement after 60, and how that's very different than somebody who, for example, might have started when they were younger. I highly recommend you read this book. She does a great job of talking about the experiences of older adults who take up creativity after age 60. Next. And related to a project that I'm doing right now here in San Francisco is, we know there was a study published in 2006 suggesting that older adults who sang in a choir for 12 months had fewer doctor visits, fewer medications, less falls, and less loneliness. And this was the study that was the basis for the next slide. Actually, one more slide. Yes. Of the Community Voices study, which was started 5 years ago here in San Francisco in collaboration with 12 senior centers, including Aquatic Park Senior Center. And the choir that you hear today that's going to sing from the Community Music Center was originally part of that study. We enrolled 390 older adults from 12 senior centers across San Francisco with an average age of 71. Most of them were women, 76%. With some nice diversity. About 2/3 were non-white folks, and 41% of the individuals were foreign-born. So we feel like we were able to reach folks from different walks of life in San Francisco. All 12 choirs have started, and just a couple weeks ago, the last choir finished their year in the study, and we are currently deep in data analysis. So for anybody who knows about this study, stay tuned. For those who participated in the study, we will be sending out a newsletter with the results as soon as we have them, and we'll be doing presentations at the different senior centers. So stay tuned. We're interested in seeing how singing in a community choir can impact health and well-being of diverse older adults in our city. Okay, that's all I have for today. Just right on time.